Welcome to What Matters, Princeton Foundation for Peace and Learning's brand new video series. In this series of interviews and panel discussions, we discuss various social issues and solutions thereof with the global experts in fields of women empowerment, education, healthcare, and world peace. Today, our guest is Ambassador Ajay Bisaria. Ambassador Bisaria is a seasoned diplomat and strategic advisor with over 35 years of experience in international relations. He served as the Indian High Commissioner in Canada and Pakistan, and as ambassador in Poland and Lithuania. He currently is the chairman of the Ministry of Steel Task Force, Government of India. Throughout his illustrious career, Ambassador Bisaria has been a steadfast advocate for peace, pushing for stronger economic ties, facilitating diplomatic dialogue, and thereby promoting cultural exchange. His commitment to fostering a sense of understanding and cooperation amongst nations has made him a well-respected figure in the field of diplomacy. We welcome Ambassador Bisaria to discuss his recently published book, Anger Management, which sheds light on the complex diplomatic relationship between India and Pakistan. The book offers an analysis of the challenges and opportunities for peace in the region and offers pragmatic solutions for fostering dialogue and cooperation. Welcome, Ambassador Bisaria, in this episode of What Matters.
Thank you everybody for joining. Welcome, Ambassador Bisaria, in this episode of What Matters. Thank you so much for joining, sir. We're very honored to have you today.
Great to be here, Amya.
Thank you, sir. So, just diving right into the questions. First, congratulations on the publication of your recently published book, Anger Management. Could you kindly provide an overview of the key themes and insights that readers can expect to find within its pages?
Well, thank you for that. And, I wrote this book over the last 2 or 3 years, and it was published in January this year. It's called Anger Management. And it's essentially a story of the India-Pakistan diplomatic relationship over the last 76 years, starting from the moment of inception when the two countries became independent on the 15th of August 1947, and going up to current times. And one of the themes I felt I should explore in the book is that of anger, is that of passion, is that of a great deal of inflamed emotions which have characterized this relationship. So there's been a good deal of anger in the relationship, starting from the seminal moment of partition, the fact that 1 million people were killed, 15 million people were displaced in 1947-48. And after that, there's been a good deal of anger because of the 4 wars India and Pakistan fought. There's been an anger about territory and the perception of lost territory, about the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And there has been anger in India about terrorism that emanated from Pakistan.
Right.
And equally, there's been a theme of managing this anger and managing this relationship so that it does not explode into a kind of conflagration. And therefore, the title Anger Management to characterize this relationship.
Yeah, that's a great introduction, sir. So as you mentioned, the relationship between India and Pakistan has been long characterized by tensions and conflicts. But how does your book shed light on these complexities and the challenges of diplomatic relations between these two neighboring countries?
One of the things that I discovered as I explored this relationship over these years was that it was very cyclical, and it was like a game of snakes and ladders, that the two countries made a lot of progress at certain times, and at other times the relationship would sink to newer lows. For instance, after some terrorist attack. And I examine this cyclicality in the relationship and try to see if there are certain trends in the way, in particularly the upcycle or the times when the relationship was better compared to the times when it was on a low. And
Right, sir.
often we found that when there were new governments in both countries, they did try to examine newer options and newer ways of looking at the relationship,
Yeah.
even though it had many structural constraints.
Right. 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 So moving to the more personal side of the book. So, sir, what inspired you to write Anger Management, and what do you hope that readers will take away from this book in terms of understanding the dynamic of India-Pakistan relations?
Well, in a sense, this book is a long answer in 540 pages to a short question, which is what do diplomats do, and particularly what do diplomats do in hostile or adversarial relationships? And the way I've answered that question is to look at not just the 2 years I spent in Pakistan in as a representative of the Indian government, but also to look at uh, what my predecessors in Islamabad did and what they went through. And I look at the 70 years that went before I went to Pakistan and the 4 years since. So it is an examination of the space for diplomacy that exists even in hostile relationships. And I think that is perhaps the larger message of the book.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I totally understand. Sir, what inspired you to write the book Anger Management? What were your personal aspirations behind it?
Well, one of them was that after I finished my career of 35 years in the Indian Foreign Service, in being part of the diplomatic journey and part of India's journey into the 21st century, one of the things I felt that since I had the opportunity uh, to be part of managing
Yes.
a very complex and challenging relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that I should perhaps record my impressions of it and also put down a historical record of the relationship as it had evolved over the years and as different diplomats had seen it. So I think that was perhaps one of the motivations
Mm-hmm.
in putting down this story, apart from the fact that this is a stranger than fiction story. So it's really a story which has a lot of elements of the bizarre, the
Yeah.
surreal,
Yes.
the kind of hostility that the Indian and Pakistani diplomats have to deal with.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, sir, given the ongoing conflicts and the hostilities going on between India and Pakistan, what role do you believe that diplomacy and dialogue can play in de-escalating these tensions and fostering mutual understandings?
So that I think is precisely the point of diplomacy and precisely the point of the book.
Sure.
And one of the arguments I make is that despite the structural constraints and the structural factors that lead a relationship, and I've identified that in the first chapter of the book as Pakistan's quest for identity, which is an unsettled quest. Its quest for territory, its quest for security, and geopolitical forces or what is happening in the rest of the world. All of these determine the shape of the relationship. But despite these constraints, there was always space for creative diplomacy. And there was always room for leadership to guide this relationship to a better space. So, despite all structural constraints which make for hostility, there is room for good leadership and there is room for smart diplomacy for steering us out of some of the troubled times that we go through.
That's a great way of putting it, sir. So, moving on to the next question. So, building on the insights from this book, what specific steps do you recommend for policymakers and diplomats to navigate these complexities of these Indo-Pak relations and work towards constructive engagement and conflict resolution?
So I think that is a complex question, and it's important not to oversimplify
Yes.
the situation,
Yes.
because it is a complex conundrum that the two countries have faced, in which they've not been able to resolve for 76 years. But I certainly point to a few directions. For instance, I feel that for India, there should be a two-track policy which should involve a tough posture on terrorism, and the fact that there is terrorism in the relationship. It needs to be dealt with a very firm posture. But at the same time, there should be creative engagement with the powers that be in Pakistan, which is the Pakistani army. That India should be have channels of communication open in order to have conversations, and possibly look for low-hanging fruit before solving the larger problems
Right.
that have
Right.
bedeviled this relationship.
Right, sir. Yeah, it's an extremely complex relationship, as all diplomatic relations are. But yes, sir, totally understandable. So, sir, anger management touches upon the importance of managing such emotions, as you just mentioned, and perceptions in diplomatic relationships. So, how can this principle be applied more broadly in international relationships to promote peaceful coexistence?
So I think if one looks at a case study of the India-Pakistan relationship, what do we see? We see a adversarial relationship between two neighbors because of multiple factors, including historical factors and including the structural factors that we are discussing. Yet we see that there is space for or for diplomacy, that there is agency to diplomats, there is agency for leaders to solve these problems. And I think that would be the lesson, that despite a good deal of adversity and hostility, diplomats should look at creative solutions rather than just give up on a relationship, and continuously look for ways to get over the immediate problems, and also be guided not by short-term passions and short-term anger because of recent events, but perhaps look at long-term interests
Yes, sir.
and look at issues in the perspective of uh, 10, 20, and 30 years, rather than of an election cycle of or just a few days.
Yes, sir. And you think that that process has been currently happening as of right now, and it should be changed?
Yes, exactly. I think the point is that certainly the situation has not been ideal. So the way that India and Pakistan have managed this relationship uh, means is that there have been multiple errors in managing the relationship. It has been a flawed approach in multiple ways. We need to learn from that past, and we need to ensure that the future is different from the past.
Yes, sir.
And it is important for Pakistan, for instance, to try to normalize itself. A normal country is essential from India's point of view to have a normal relationship. And
Mhm.
what does that mean is that, if Pakistan were to become a normal democracy, perhaps not overly guided by a strong sense of security paranoia, there would be hope to have normal trading relationships. You don't immediately become the
Yes.
best of friends,
Yes.
but you learn to be neighbors who learn to deal with each other.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah. So, as an experienced diplomat, sir, what lessons have you learned from your engagement with India and Pakistan that you believe are relevant to the broader quest for global peace and security?
I think it is important to address difficult relationships with even more intense energy than you do your friendly relationships. some relationships are hard, some knots have been tied by history.
Yeah.
So I would draw the lesson that it is even more important to put our creative energies into difficult relationship. Look at broader international parallels. Often in the case of India and Pakistan, when some people express hopelessness, others say, "Look at France and Germany in the last century.
Right.
They were enemies, and suddenly they are very close friends, which are part of the same European Union."
Yes.
So there are multiple examples where sworn foes and sworn enemies have found ways out of the hostility by creatively engaging, by letting time heal the wounds. And I think that is important for both countries to normalize this relationship
Yes.
gradually, because it sucks away a lot of energy away from the central purpose of governments, which is to provide prosperity to their
Yes.
people.
Absolutely, sir. That's great, sir. So, in promoting your book and its themes, what opportunities do you see for fostering dialogue and engagement between these individuals, communities, or policymakers on issues related to conflict resolution?
One of the lessons I would draw is that uh, for India, it is important to have several and multiple Pakistan policies. So there would be a policy for dealing with the government, policy for dealing with the army, a people-to-people diplomacy policy,
Hmm.
and, for instance, a business-to-business trade
Yeah.
policy.
Yes.
And all these policy options should remain under continuous examination. And similarly for Pakistan, I think it is important to be, looking at a future where things could be normal and looking at ways to get there. There are long-term issues that often exist in many relationships of territory and so on,
Yes.
which can, for a while, be frozen,
Yes.
so that we could look at more creative, immediate solutions. And one of the factors in this relationship also is that both countries are very young.
Yeah.
50% of the population is under the age of 30 in both countries,
Hmm.
and younger folks across the world have a different set of aspirations. They are less tolerant of what they feel are
Yes,
the
sir.
meaningless disputes of the past. So I
Yeah.
think we can tap into the energy of the youth, and see that if how they can engage with each other, how they can come up with creative solutions, and find ways out of these conundrums.
Yeah, that's a great point, sir. A lot of the youth definitely does feel that. Yeah, I think it's wherever, but violence is not really the answer in this case anymore. So definitely, the creative aspect is much needed. So finally, sir, as we're approaching the end of this discussion, the last question I wanted to ask you is, looking ahead, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of India-Pakistan relations? And how do you envision your book contributing to efforts aimed at achieving lasting peace and stability in the region? So, sir, in other words, how do you see the relationship evolving between the new India-Pakistan government?
Yes, I think that's a great question. And if one looks at the past, one lesson is clear, that let's not repeat the mistakes of the past. Let's look at newer solutions.
Yes.
And in the immediate future, I see some reason for cautious optimism in this relationship,
Sure.
because in the year 2024, both India and Pakistan have new governments. Pakistan had an election in February 2024, very flawed election, and there were allegations of a lot of rigging,
Yes, sir.
but nevertheless a new government. And India is going through the largest democratic exercise in the world and will have a new government in June. So fresh governments with fresh mandates are a good time to examine uh, this relationship and look at ways forward. And apart from the fact, the creative solutions that we've spoken about, can we engage more youth? in having conversations about the relationship.
Yes, sir.
There are social media influencers and social media
Yes.
channels on both countries that look at each other a little differently from the way the governments look at each other. So can that be deployed to have a fresh look at the relationship? So if my book can provoke a discussion on this within India and Pakistan and globally, I think I would have achieved an important objective by simply, putting forth the history,
Yes.
the ability to look at it, and to say, can we re-examine this relationship with a new lens and look at a way forward, which is different from the wrong paths that we adopted in the past.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. So thank you so much for your time, sir. This concludes the end of the discussion. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of What Matters, Ambassador Bisaria, sir.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you for having me, and all the best for your future programs.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.